The marble floors of the Whitmore estate gleamed like ice. Amara's footsteps made no sound as she glided across them, her black shoes polished but worn thin. The air smelled faintly of imported roses and something colder, money, perhaps. Or the people who held it? Amara, the linen's crooked again, snapped Victoria Whitmore without turning around. She lounged on the velvet chaise like it was a throne, one leg draped over the other, her fingers scrolling through her phone as if the world existed to entertain her. Amara leaned down, smoothing the white linen napkin with practiced fingers. "Yes, Miss Whitmore." "Apologies." Victoria didn't answer. The Whitmores were a portrait of wealth, the kind that wore its privilege like a tailored suit. There was Mr. Whitmore Charles, always in his cufflinks and sharp suits, his voice a serrated knife that cut through every room. Then there was Mrs. Whitmore, more polished mannequin than woman, forever draped in pearls and disapproval. Their 3 children were bred from the same frostbitten cloth, with Victoria, the eldest, wielding cruelty as skillfully as her mother wore Dior. Amara had worked for them for 4 years. She knew how they liked their coffee, the name of their third poodle that died 10 years ago, and the exact angle Mr. Whitmore preferred his office blinds tilted. She knew not to speak unless spoken to walk with eyes down, to be invisible but always efficient. She also knew how to slip $200 of her paycheck every month into an envelope addressed to her mother. Lupus was a cruel disease, and medication didn't care if you made $9.75 an hour folding napkins for billionaires. "Miss me," came a soft whisper from behind the doorway. It was James, one of the kitchen staff, carrying a tray of smoked salmon canapés. Amara offered a tired smile. "Only when I'm lonely enough to miss burnt toast." He grinned and winked. "You wound me." James was the only one in the house who looked Amara in the eye. He didn't know about her mother or the bills, but he knew how to make her laugh, and sometimes that was enough. Outside, sleek black cars slithered up the driveway. The annual Whitmore Gala was tonight, a decadent show of wealth for guests who already had too much. Amara had spent the entire day preparing ironing linens, polishing crystal, arranging white orchids in absurd, gravity-defying spirals. The ballroom now shimmered like a dream. Or a trap. By 8 p.m., the house roared with laughter and champagne. Politicians, celebrities, and CEOs floated through like they owned the air. Amara moved silently among them, refilling glasses, collecting empty plates, careful not to touch or speak too much. She was the help, after all. In a corner of the room, Mr. Whitmore held court, his booming laugh reverberating across the marble walls. He was telling some story about how he once bought a company just to fire its CEO. His guests laughed on cue. "Amara!" Victoria called across the ballroom. She was in a red Valentino gown, wine glass dangling from her fingers, her lips painted like blood. The kind of beautiful that could get away with being cruel. Amara approached, balancing a silver tray. "Yes, Miss Whitmore." Victoria turned, exaggerated clumsiness in her movements. "I think I'm ready for a refill." "Merlot. The one from Tuscany. And try not to spill it this time." A cruel glint sparkled in her eye. Amara nodded and returned minutes later with the bottle. She poured with steady hands, her face unreadable. But fate, fickle, unkind, always watching, had other plans. As she turned to leave, a guest bumped into her from behind. The tray tipped. The wine glass tipped. A crimson arc soared through the air. And landed, with surgical precision, on the bodice of Victoria's designer gown. Gasps echoed through the ballroom like gunshots. The music stumbled to a stop. The room held its breath. Victoria froze. Then, slowly, theatrically, she looked down at the red stain blossoming across her chest. Amara's heart dropped into her stomach. "Miss, I'm so sorry." "It was an accident." Victoria's shriek cut through her apology. "Do you have any idea how much this dress cost?" Guests were already pulling out phones, some pretending not to film, others hiding smug smirks. "I didn't mean to." "Of course you didn't mean to, you pathetic little," Victoria started, but Mr. Whitmore was already approaching, expression carved in stone. "What's going on?" His voice cut the air. "She just ruined my dress," Victoria snapped, pointing like Amara was a rat on the floor. Charles Whitmore looked at Amara the way one might look at a stain on fine carpet. "This is unacceptable." Amara's hands trembled. "Sir, someone bumped into me, I didn't see." He didn't care. "In front of our guests? You've embarrassed this family. You're fired." Silence. For a long moment, no one moved. James started forward, but Amara's eyes stopped him. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, sir." She turned, the room parting for her like she carried a disease. Heads turned. A few guests looked uncomfortable. Most looked entertained. Outside, the night was cool and sharp. The stars looked down, indifferent. Amara didn't cry. She walked past the iron gates and kept walking, heels clicking down the long, tree-lined drive until the mansion was nothing but a speck in the distance. She could still feel the sting of humiliation, the eyes on her, the finality of it all. But somewhere deep beneath the shame, something else stirred. Not anger. Not yet. But the first quiet pulse of a truth she had long buried. They didn't know who she really was. Not yet. But they would. The door to Amara's apartment groaned open like it was morning right alongside her. She didn't bother turning on the lights. She didn't need to see the faded beige walls or the pile of unopened mail by the shoe rack. She knew every crack in the tile and every stain on the carpet. This place, once a refuge, now felt like a cage, one she had walked into with eyes wide open. She dropped her purse onto the kitchen counter, the sound echoing louder than it should in the silence. Her phone buzzed, screen lighting up with another message she didn't have the energy to read. Maybe it was one of the interns from the foundation, or maybe it was someone from the press hungry for another soundbite about the scandal. She turned the phone face down. Amara sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. For the first time since the board meeting, she let herself cry, not the quiet, composed tears she could blink away in the mirror. These tears were angry, guttural, humiliating. One day ago, she was director of community engagement at the Whitmore Foundation, loved by the staff, respected in her field. Now, just another disposable employee, discarded like spoiled leftovers. They didn't even have the decency to fire her in private. The boardroom had been full of stiff smiles and cold eyes. And Catherine Whitmore's voice, silky and venomous, still echoed in her ears. "It's unfortunate, Amara, but we must uphold the integrity of the foundation." The integrity of the foundation. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Integrity. They had engineered her downfall. All because she got too close to something or someone they didn't want her near. She wiped her face and stood up, moving toward the kitchen for water she didn't really want. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her mother called that evening. Amara didn't want to answer, but the guilt was stronger than the shame. "Baby." Her mother's voice was soft, cautious. "I heard. I'm so sorry." "I'm fine, Mom," Amara lied, even as her throat threatened to close. "Don't give me that. I know what kind of fight is in my girl, but that doesn't mean your heart ain't hurting." Amara swallowed hard. "It's just a job." "No. It's more than that. It's about the way they treated you like you were nothing. But let me tell you something. You are not what they called you. You are not how they made you feel. You hear me?" Tears welled again, silently this time. "I hear you. Never forget who you are, Amara. You come from strength. You come from people who didn't have a seat at the table, so they built their own. And you'll do the same. I know it. I don't feel strong. You don't have to feel strong. You just have to remember you are." After they hung up, Amara sat in silence, her mother's words looping in her head. She hadn't told her the full truth, not about the way the Whitmores looked at her like she was an infestation. Not about the whisper campaign she could feel circling her for weeks before the board meeting. Or about him, Caleb Whitmore, and how everything had changed after they'd gotten too close. Maybe that was her mistake. Trusting a Whitmore. She moved to the closet in her bedroom, pulling down an old, dust-covered box from the top shelf. It was one of those things she'd kept around because it felt important, even if she didn't fully understand why. It belonged to her grandmother Nana Elsie. The woman who raised her after her father disappeared and her mother worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Nana Elsie had been tough, sharp, and quiet in her wisdom. Amara remembered the box clearly from childhood. It had always been sealed tight, with a ribbon and a note taped to the top, "Do not open unless your heart is broken." As a girl, she'd asked about it once. "Why wait?" she'd said. "Because some truths are only meant for when you've lost everything," Nana had answered. Tonight felt like that night. Her fingers trembled as she untied the ribbon, feeling a strange weight settle in her chest. The inside smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. At the top was a yellowed photograph, a black and white image of a young black woman in a maid's uniform, standing beside a tall white man in a suit. The edges were worn, but the intensity in their eyes was unmistakable. Beneath it was a folded document. Amara opened it slowly, her eyes scanning each line. At first, the legal language blurred together, but one sentence stood out in bold: "This document certifies the birth of one Amara Elise Jennings, born to Claudia Jennings and Arthur Whitmore." Amara blinked. Once. Twice. What? She read it again, then again, as her pulse began to race. The air in the room felt thinner, like the walls were closing in. She flipped the document over. There were signatures, a notary stamp, even a hospital seal. Arthur Whitmore. The name hit her like a brick. Not just a Whitmore. The Arthur Whitmore. The man who built the foundation. The man whose family had just thrown her to the wolves without hesitation. Her grandfather. Her blood. Amara staggered back onto the bed, still clutching the document. Her mind spun as if it couldn't catch up with her body. Nana had always been quiet about the past. She'd told stories about working as a maid in some rich family's house, about surviving Jim Crow, about raising a daughter on her own. But she'd never said this. Why now? Why had she kept it hidden all these years? Because she knew. She knew Amara would one day find herself in the crosshairs of that family. Amara reached for the photo again, this time looking closer. The man's face was unmistakable. It was Arthur Whitmore, decades younger. And the woman beside him, her Nana. Her heart broke all over again, not just from the betrayal, or the lies, but from the realization that her entire life had been orbiting around a secret so enormous, it could destroy the empire the Whitmores had built. Or maybe, it could reclaim it. She sat there, staring at the photograph, the document resting against her knees. All her anger, shame, and sadness suddenly had direction. If they wanted to erase her, humiliate her, pretend she didn't belong, they had no idea what she had just found. They had tried to break her. But they had no idea whose blood ran through her veins. And now she had a name. Arthur Whitmore. Amara stood at the edge of the city, where glass towers gave way to ivy-covered brick and memory-laden streets. She hadn't been here in years, not since her grandmother's funeral. But today wasn't about nostalgia. It was about truth. The law office of Jerome Maddox was nestled between a closed-down tailor shop and a bookstore that still smelled like parchment and mystery. She pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. Jerome looked up from behind his desk. His once black hair was now streaked with gray, and wire-rimmed glasses clung precariously to his nose. But the warm glint in his eyes hadn't changed. "Amara Ellis," he said, standing. "It's been a long time." "Too long, Jerome," she replied, her voice calm but edged with purpose. "I need your help." The room filled with silence as Jerome read through the worn, yellowing folder she'd found in her grandmother's attic a week ago. The handwriting was faded but legible: legal documents, letters, and a birth certificate she had never seen before. When he looked up, his eyes were sharper. "Where did you find this?" "In a locked box under the floorboards." It was hidden beneath her sewing cabinet. Jerome exhaled deeply, pushing back in his chair. This changes everything." He reached for a manila folder in his drawer, fished out a pen, and began flipping through the documents. "This letter here, it's from Samuel Whitmore. Arthur's older brother. Dated 1989. I didn't even know he existed until last week," Amara said, sitting straighter. "My grandmother never talked about him. He died in '91, sudden heart attack. The family swept it under the rug, like they always do. But this letter, this proves he acknowledged the affair. More than that, he knew about you." Amara swallowed hard. "And the estate?" Jerome turned the page. "Samuel never married. No children. At the time of his death, he held 30% of Whitmore Industries. If this letter is accurate, and your grandmother's affidavit stands, that stake legally passes to you." Her breath caught in her throat. "I'm the heir." "Yes. But there's a catch. After Samuel's death, Arthur became executor of the estate. He suppressed this. Quietly amended the trust with falsified documents. He paid off a judge. The signature here is forged. So he knew all along." "Without a doubt." Amara stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. Cars passed. People laughed. Somewhere, a siren wailed. But her world was unnaturally still. "What do I do, Jerome?" "You could let it go. Walk away. Pretend you never saw any of it. You'd be safe that way." She turned to him, eyes clear. "And the other option? You file a petition to reopen the estate. Challenge the will. If it holds, you become a 30% shareholder of one of the most powerful private firms on the Eastern Seaboard. And I go to war with Arthur Whitmore." Jerome nodded solemnly. "You won't just be challenging a man. You'll be challenging an empire. He won't take this lying down." Amara's hand brushed against the folder. Her grandmother's handwriting danced across the affidavit, almost like a whisper urging her forward. "She gave up everything to protect me," she said. and he erased her like she never existed. Jerome watched her carefully. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" "No," Amara replied. "But I'm doing it anyway." The drive back to her apartment felt longer than it was. Traffic inched past, but her mind raced ahead. She kept replaying the moment she found the box, the dust-covered floorboard, the key taped to the underside of the cabinet, and the quiet way the wood creaked open like it knew secrets were never meant to be silenced forever. Her grandmother, the quiet, reserved woman who raised her, had always worn sorrow like a second skin. Now Amara knew why. She arrived home to find a voicemail blinking on her phone. Pressing play, she recognized the voice instantly. "Miss Ellis, this is Michael Leeds. I work with the Whitmore family office. Mr. Whitmore would like to arrange a private conversation. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." Her chest tightened. He knew. The restaurant was upscale, discreet. All dark wood and hushed tones, like it was designed for secrets. Arthur Whitmore sat at the far booth, flanked by a wall of mirrors that reflected everything except truth. His silver hair was neatly combed, his suit too perfect. The kind of man who had everything to lose and knew it. "Miss Ellis," he said, standing as she approached. "Thank you for coming. I'm not here to make nice, Mr. Whitmore." "Of course." He motioned for her to sit. "Then let's not waste time." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, a non-disclosure agreement and a check with too many zeros. "You walk away," he said, "and this is yours. No lawsuits. No court battles. Just peace." Amara stared at the check, then back at him. "You knew my grandmother. You knew Samuel loved her." Arthur's face remained still. "What I knew was that my brother was naive. Emotional. He was going to destroy everything we'd built for some fleeting romance." "It wasn't fleeting," Amara snapped. "It was real." Arthur leaned in, eyes cold. "This family is not built on emotion. It's built on legacy. Control. And you are a threat. And you," she said, sliding the check back, "are afraid." He chuckled softly. "You think the truth matters? The truth is what people with power say it is." Amara stood, folder still in hand. "Then it's time someone else held the power." Later that night, she sat on her bed, surrounded by papers and memory. The birth certificate. The affidavit. The love letters. Proof of a hidden life, silenced by greed. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Jerome, "Let's file. I'm ready." Hitting send felt like releasing the breath she'd held for years. Her fight was just beginning. But for the first time, she wasn't running from her past. She was walking straight into it with fire in her veins and justice on her side. The towering iron gates of the Whitmore estate creaked open, but this time, Amara didn't walk through them in a crisp maid's uniform, head down, shoulders tense. She stepped out of a sleek black car, flanked by two lawyers in tailored suits. Her heels clicked against the marble driveway like punctuation marks, each one a declaration, "I'm not the same girl who left." Inside the mansion, chaos was already stirring. A butler peeked through the window and rushed to alert the family. Mr. Whitmore had just sat down for brunch when the news reached him. "She's here," the butler whispered. "With legal counsel." He froze, fork suspended mid-air, his wife gasping beside him. "This must be a joke," Mrs. Whitmore said, setting down her mimosa. But the color had already drained from her face. No one was ready. They thought she'd disappeared. They thought she'd taken the hush money and moved on. But they had underestimated Amara. Again. The foyer echoed as Amara walked in like she owned the place because, as her lawyers had confirmed, she just might. The will they'd unearthed was legitimate. Sealed. Undeniable. Harold Whitmore, the old man they'd all erased from memory, had named Amara, his granddaughter, as a legal heir to the Whitmore estate. Mr. Whitmore approached her, puffed up pride wrapped in an expensive robe. "What is this?" he snapped, eyes darting to the lawyers. "A reckoning," Amara said, her voice steady. "You tried to bury me. You forgot that roots grow in the dark." He laughed, cold and sharp. "You think you can just walk in here with a piece of paper and take what's mine?" "I don't want what's yours," she said. "I want what's mine." Her lawyer, Miss DeWitt, stepped forward. "We've filed a civil suit. Fraud, defamation, and willful concealment of inheritance. Discovery begins immediately. You'll be hearing from us." "And the press," her second lawyer added with a small smile. "They've already been briefed." Mr. Whitmore's face twisted. "You went to the media." Amara tilted her head. "You raised me to clean floors. I learned to clean house." Within hours, the story exploded. The maid who took on billionaires. Whitmore heiress discovered living as servant in family mansion, hidden heir shocks high society. Hashtags flooded social media. Hashtag Maid no more. Hashtag hidden Whitmore. Hashtag justice for Amara. Videos of Amara's quiet dignity during her press statement went viral. She didn't cry. She didn't lash out. She simply stood there, holding the will in her hand, saying, "For years, I worked in the shadows of my own legacy. That ends today." Young women reposted her photo with captions like, "This is what power looks like," and "She served them tea, now she's serving justice." Even people who didn't follow high society gossip became invested. She was the underdog they hadn't seen coming. Back at the estate, Mr. Whitmore called for a private meeting. "You're making a scene," he said to Amara, seated across from him in the oak-paneled study. "This isn't the way things are done in our world." "Maybe your world needs a shake-up," she replied. He leaned forward. "I can offer you a deal. Cash. Property. A trust fund. Quiet money. You walk away, no court, no cameras." Amara looked at the check he slid across the desk. Then she looked him dead in the eye. "You had 18 years to give me what I deserved. You gave me mop buckets. You gave me silence. You gave me a number instead of a name. Now you're scared, and you think money will buy my silence." She pushed the check back toward him. "You can't bribe justice." He glared. "You'll regret this." "No," she said. "You will." The court proceedings became a media spectacle. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse with signs reading, "Let her inherit," and "No more hidden daughters." Journalists dissected every angle. TV pundits debated whether Amara's claim would upend estate law precedents. Some networks speculated that more heirs in similar situations might come forward. A few tabloids tried to smear her character, suggesting she'd manipulated her way into the will. But Amara had receipts, years of employment records, DNA tests, and, most damning, a sealed letter from Harold Whitmore himself. "To my granddaughter, Amara," it read. "I'm sorry they never let me know you. This is my attempt to make it right." Even critics were silenced. The Whitmores began to fracture under the pressure. Cousins who once laughed behind Amara's back now reached out cautiously. One even texted, "We always wondered why you were treated differently. Proud of you." Amara didn't respond. Mrs. Whitmore stopped appearing in public altogether. Her social media went dark. Mr. Whitmore held a press conference, trying to salvage the family's image. "We are cooperating fully with the courts," he said, his voice forced. "We are a private family navigating a deeply personal matter." Amara, meanwhile, posted one sentence on her own account that afternoon: "You made me invisible. Now the world sees me." At night, Amara sat alone on the rooftop of her apartment, watching the city lights flicker. Fame was a strange thing. She hadn't wanted to be a symbol. She just wanted to matter. But now, strangers called her brave. Kids sent her messages saying she gave them hope. She clutched her phone as it buzzed with another interview request. Then another. Then a sponsorship deal. Influencers wanted to collab. A docuseries producer reached out. A book agent emailed. But amid the noise, all Amara really wanted was something simple: freedom. Truth. Her whole life, she'd scrubbed their secrets from marble floors. Now, she was scrubbing her name clean of their shame. And it was working. One night, her lawyer called with news. "They're buckling. They're offering full recognition, a seat on the board, and your share of the estate publicly. But only if you drop the charges." Amara stared out the window, her reflection sharp against the glass. "I want the truth on record," she said. "Not a compromise. Not another secret deal. I want the next girl who's told to know her place to remember my name." Her lawyer paused. "So we go to trial?" Amara nodded. "We go to trial." The Whitmore estate, once the image of impenetrable wealth and prestige, now stood as a symbol of decay rotting from the inside out. It began with whispers. First, a few murmurs online. A grainy video of Victoria Whitmore screaming at a hotel clerk. A resurfaced article about Mr. Whitmore's alleged affairs. Then came the avalanche: exposés, lawsuits, damning editorials, and headlines that spared no one. The Whitmore illusion cracks. From royalty to ruin, inside the collapse of America's power family. Victoria watched the news cycle with clenched fists and trembling lips. Her fury simmered, then boiled over in explosive outbursts. She screamed at assistants, trashed a $14,000 vase in her penthouse suite, and accused everyone including her husband of betrayal. "You let this happen," she hissed at him, mascara smeared and glass crunching under her stilettos. "You said we were untouchable." Mr. Whitmore didn't respond. He couldn't. Not when 3 of his biggest investors had pulled out within 48 hours. Not when board members were demanding a vote of no confidence. His phone never stopped ringing, but he stopped answering. What was there left to say? The carefully constructed image charity galas, polished interviews, philanthropic facades was crumbling in real time. Amara watched it all unfold from the shadows. She hadn't expected the fallout to be so violent. At first, it felt like justice. The public outrage, the humiliation, this was what they deserved. Every lie they told, every life they destroyed, now played out on screens across the country. But as days passed, the thrill of vindication dulled into something heavier. Colder. It started with the phone calls. Unknown numbers. Then text messages: "You'll get what's coming to you. You think this is over? Watch your back." She stopped answering her phone. Next came the reporters. Not just outside her apartment, but outside her mother's job. A local teacher's aide, caught in a scandal she had nothing to do with. Her mother called her one night, voice shaking. Amara, they were in the parking lot again. Shouting questions at me about the Whitmore scandal. They said your name. How did they even find me? Amara's stomach turned. I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't think they'd come after you. You need to stop this, her mother whispered. Whatever you're doing, it's not worth it. They're powerful people. I know, Amara said softly. But they don't get to hurt people and walk away. Her mother was silent. Then came the words that haunted her more than any threat, and what if you're becoming just like them? Victoria, meanwhile, had launched her own war. She hired a private investigator, 2 PR firms, and a crisis manager. The family's lawyers began sending cease and desists to anyone speaking out. But nothing could plug the leaks. Skeletons fell out of closets faster than they could be buried. Photos of Mr. Whitmore with a young intern in Rome. A former housekeeper testifying about hush money. Tax irregularities. Insider trading whispers. A charity donation scandal. And then, the footage. Leaked security camera footage from inside a Whitmore Foundation gala. Amara in the background, handing an envelope to a whistleblower. It went viral within hours. Conspiracy theories flared. Reddit threads lit up with speculation. Who was the mysterious girl exposing the Whitmores? The internet crowned her the masked crusader. Anonymous accounts called her a hero. Others weren't so kind. Traitor. Liar. Attention whore. Some said she staged the whole thing. Others accused her of trying to take the Whitmores down out of jealousy or revenge. Only a few guessed the truth: she was a survivor. Amara sat on her apartment floor, scrolling through comments. Her hands trembled. The messages weren't just targeting her now, they were threatening her mother, her friends, anyone loosely connected to her. She'd thought exposure would bring peace. That once the truth was out, she could breathe again. But the truth, it turned out, was just the beginning. And it came with a price. Back at the estate, the Whitmores were unraveling. Victoria refused to be seen in public without designer sunglasses and a fresh blowout, but the cracks were visible. Her skin was pale. Her nerves, frayed. I want her name, she told her pie. The girl. I want to know everything about her. Where she lives. Who she talks to. Mr. Whitmore sat in the corner, silent. He looked older now. Smaller. His suits hung looser on his frame. He spent hours locked in his study, whiskey glass in hand, watching the stock ticker like a man waiting for the crash. Amara avoided mirrors now. The girl she saw didn't feel like her. There was something in her eyes, something dark and tired. The victory she imagined had never come. Just noise. Scrutiny. Guilt. She visited her mother that weekend, hoping for a brief escape. They didn't talk about the news. They watched reruns and ate popcorn. Her mother rubbed her back like she used to when Amara was little, when nightmares kept her up at night. You're still you, her mother said softly. Don't let them take that away. Amara wanted to believe her. But in the silence that followed, she asked the question that had begun to echo in her chest: what if I've become the villain? Outside, cameras clicked. Inside, the masks were finally off. And no one liked what they saw. The cemetery was quiet, save for the soft rustle of trees swaying in the early autumn breeze. Amara stood between 2 gravestones, one weathered with time, the other fresh and unyielding. Her grandmother's grave bore flowers already beginning to wilt, a testament to regular visits. Her biological father's grave was simpler, more stoic, like a man buried beneath layers of absence. She knelt down, running her fingers gently over her grandmother's name. "I'm still trying to make sense of it all," she whispered. "But I'm not angry anymore. Not like I was." Her words floated into the wind like a confession. She had come here expecting clarity, maybe even closure. But what she found instead was a hollow that no vengeance could fill. No confrontation with the Whitmores would change what had already been lost. She turned to her father's grave next, her voice quieter. "I didn't know you. But I know what they said about you. And I know what they didn't say. I guess. I came to understand." The wind picked up, sending leaves scattering across the path behind her. For a moment, she closed her eyes and let it wrap around her like a hug from ghosts she never got to meet. Back in the city, Amara stepped into the gleaming lobby of the hotel where she'd once scrubbed toilets and folded sheets in a back room no one ever saw. She was dressed differently now, sharp lines, clean confidence, but she hadn't come to impress. "Miss Amara," a small voice asked behind her. She turned to see a girl no older than 18, thin-framed, eyes wide with the eagerness of someone who hadn't yet been burned by the world. Her name tag read Selene. "You're here for the training session, right?" Selene asked. Amara smiled. "Something like that." Over the next hour, she taught Selene how to handle a difficult guest without shrinking, how to speak with dignity no matter her title, and most importantly that she was not invisible. That kind of knowledge, Amara realized, had been hard-won. It wasn't in any handbook. It was learned in the quiet after being disrespected. In the silence after realizing no one was coming to save you. "I used to be you," Amara said as they took a break near the loading dock. "This place treated me like I was disposable. But I wasn't. And you aren't either." Selene looked at her with a kind of awe that made Amara uncomfortable. "I thought I was supposed to just be grateful," Selene said. Amara shook her head. "Grateful doesn't mean small. It doesn't mean silent." For the first time in a long time, Amara felt a flicker of purpose not fueled by rage. Maybe this was the real fight, not against a family name, but against the systems and beliefs that made people like her believe they were less. Later that week, Amara found herself seated in a modest cafe on the edge of town, nursing a lukewarm coffee and scanning the faces of strangers until one of them wasn't. A man approached, early 30s, tall, gentle eyes that didn't quite match the Whitmore arrogance she had come to recognize. He looked awkward in his own skin, like he'd learned not to take up too much space. "Amara?" he asked. She nodded. "Ezra. Ezra Whitmore. Her cousin. The forgotten one. The other black sheep." He sat down slowly, hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Thanks for meeting me." "I almost didn't," she said, honest as ever. "But I figured, if they pushed you out too, then maybe you're not like them." Ezra laughed, bitterly. "I'm not. At least, I try not to be." Their conversation wove through family trees, childhood silences, and painful lessons. Ezra had once tried to take over a community outreach initiative under the Whitmore banner, Something Meaningful. He was met with disdain, told it wasn't the family's image. "They don't like anything that doesn't come with a ribbon and a headline," he said. "I stopped trying to belong a long time ago." Amara nodded. She understood that language, the one spoken in the shadows of wealth, where love was conditional and inclusion came at the price of silence. "I used to think I had to prove something to them," Amara said. "Like if I was loud enough, successful enough, they'd finally acknowledge me. But now I don't care if they see me. I care if I see myself. Ezra sat back, nodding slowly. You know, maybe we start something different. Something outside the family. An anti-legacy, Amara said with a grin. Built on truth instead of reputation. They toasted their coffee cups. It wasn't a revolution, not yet. But it was a start. The following Sunday, Amara returned to her grandmother's grave alone. This time, she brought no questions, only a bouquet of fresh lilies and a quiet peace she hadn't known in years. I met Ezra, she said aloud. He's decent. And I'm helping someone. A girl who reminds me of me. I think you'd like that. She knelt again, her knees pressing into the cold earth. I thought this was about revenge. About showing the Whitmores who I am. But really, it's about showing me who I am. And you. I carry you with me. The sun broke through the clouds then, just enough to warm her shoulders. Standing, she whispered one last thing, blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty does. Kindness does. Truth does. She walked away without looking back. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just a different chapter, one not defined by bitterness, but by becoming. The morning sky was gray, layered with heavy clouds that seemed to mirror the weight in Amara's chest. Her team had been up until 3 a.m. reviewing the last tranche of documents, new legal evidence that could dismantle the Whitmore legacy, piece by piece. The conference room was silent, save for the hum of laptops and the occasional rustle of papers. Charts covered the glass walls, flow charts, redacted tax forms, wire transfer records, nonprofit filings. At the center of it all was Amara, dressed in black and steel gray, her eyes hard with focus. We have enough, said Nina, her voice barely above a whisper. Amara looked up. To convict. To ruin. And maybe more. They had found it all: falsified grant reports from the Whitmore Foundation, proof of offshore accounts that siphoned untaxed millions, and correspondence suggesting collusion with a network of shell companies across 4 countries. Amara's fingers brushed the file labeled Charity Fraud, 2013-2020. Inside, one signature repeated like a drum beat: Samuel Whitmore. Amara stood. Send the letter. 3 hours later, the Whitmores received their final warning. It arrived by courier, thick legal envelope, clean and direct. Addressed to the Whitmore estate, legal counsel, it contained a list of charges, scanned copies of evidence, and one simple offer: settle quietly. Publicly confess. Cooperate, and avoid full prosecution. Amara gave them 72 hours. Back at her office, the mood was tense but charged. There was no turning back. Let me get this straight, said Malik, scanning the breakdown. They committed tax fraud through 3 dummy charities, laundered the money via an art acquisition firm, and used that to fund political donations and private jets. Amara nodded. All under the guise of philanthropy. They built a reputation as the country's most generous family. But every cent donated was a shield. A lie. What about the whistleblower? Asked Priya. Do we have their protection in place? Yes, Amara replied. They're already in safe housing. Their testimony is solid. And we have their recordings. Those recordings were damning. In one, Nathan Whitmore, the family's golden boy, laughed about creative accounting and how easy it was to buy silence with scholarships and gala tickets. People worship them, Amara said quietly. But everything they've touched is infected. Every hospital wing, every scholarship fund, every endowment. All paid for with stolen money. Day 2. No response from the Whitmores. Just silence. Then, around 3 p.m., Amara's assistant walked in, pale. "They're going to fight," she said, handing over a statement just released to the press. The Whitmore family categorically denies all accusations. "These are fabricated claims by individuals seeking fame and fortune. We will defend our legacy with every legal tool at our disposal." They called it fabricated. Nina seethed. Amara stared at the paper. Then they've made their choice. By the next morning, the wheels were in motion. The press had caught wind of the coming legal storm, and headlines started to surface: "Whitmore dynasty under fire, legal scandal brewing. Exclusive, allegations of fraud and tax evasion rock philanthropic empire, truth or vendetta." The woman taking on the Whitmores. Reporters gathered outside the courthouse. Camera crews lined the sidewalk. Amara watched from the tinted window of her car, still as stone. Inside, her legal team assembled. She walked in, document case in hand, her mind already 2 moves ahead. "This is it," Malik said. "Once we file, it's public record." "You sure?" "Too many people stayed silent," Amara replied. "I won't be one of them." She walked up to the clerk's desk and handed over the file. "Whitmore ETALV State and People, filing hashtag 301274A. The stamp fell with a heavy thud. That night, she stood alone in her apartment, lights off, watching the storm roll in through her window. A message buzzed on her phone: "You're making a mistake." No name. No number. Just the warning. Another followed, minutes later: "You'll regret this." She put her phone down and didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out the last photo she had of her father smiling, free, before the Whitmores had buried him under debt and false allegations. "You won't be forgotten," she whispered. The next day was war. The Whitmores filed a countersuit, accusing Amara of defamation, harassment, and attempting to destroy the reputation of a family who has given so much. Their PR machine went into overdrive. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #StandWithWhitmore and conspiracy theories claiming Amara was funded by rival billionaires. But what the Whitmores didn't have, what they could never erase, was proof. Amara's team released a preliminary dossier to the press: verified wire transfers, timestamps, a whistleblower affidavit, and a 17-minute audio file. The public's faith began to crack. And the Whitmores' polished image, years in the making, began to fracture. Inside the courthouse, the judge reviewed the preliminary evidence in chambers. He was a quiet man, methodical and fair, but Amara didn't miss the slight furrow in his brow when he saw the offshore account trails. He looked up. "This isn't just a civil matter. It could become federal," she said. "If the IRS or Department of Justice gets involved." "They will," the judge replied. "Eventually." He approved the motion to unseal the case. Effective immediately, everything became public. By the end of the week, their empire was bleeding. Major partners began pulling funding. Universities quietly removed the Whitmore name from programs. A city councilwoman announced an independent audit of the Whitmore Foundation's contributions. But the family remained defiant. Samuel Whitmore, the patriarch, made his first public appearance in months, grim-faced, defiant, denying everything. "We have weathered storms before," he said at a hastily arranged press conference. "We will not be brought down by lies." But this time, it wasn't a storm. It was a reckoning. Amara stood before the media for the first time, surrounded by her team, her voice calm but unwavering. "This case is not about revenge," she began. It's about accountability. The truth matters. Integrity matters. No one, no matter how wealthy, how powerful, is above the law. She held up a redacted tax form, then a document showing how funds were funneled through a children's charity and used to purchase a private island. This isn't generosity. It's theft disguised as kindness. The crowd erupted with questions. Do you think they'll go to jail? Do you have more evidence? Are you afraid? Amaro looked out at the sea of faces and cameras. Yes, she said simply. But I'm more afraid of what happens if we let them get away with it. Behind her, the courthouse loomed like a monolith. And inside, the case of Whitmore et al. Was only beginning. But for the first time, the truth had teeth. And it was hungry. The court